We are the Alcoholic Beverage Regulation Administration. We issue and renew all licenses that enable all of our qualified businesses to sell and serve alcoholic beverages. There's ABRA, which is the Alcoholic Beverage Regulation Administration, and then we have an ABC board, or Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. So we monitor compliance, and with the recommendation or guidance of the ABC board, we take appropriate enforcement action when our licensees violate. We also propose new legislation. And we also have a pretty extensive education program undertaken by both our adjudication and enforcement divisions as far as helping our licensees remain in compliance. We have 3 divisions. I'm the program manager for the licensing division, and my division is responsible for the review and processing of all ABC license applications. After licensing and after that's complete, we hand off to our enforcement division. Our enforcement division stays pretty busy because, again, we have about 1,500 establishments across the city, and they make sure that all of those establishments remain in compliance in accordance with Title 23 and 25 of the DC Official Code. So they conduct regular visits of all 1,500 establishments. They also issue citations for licensees who are found to be non-compliant. So, and also, again, if they're found not to be in compliant, we'll embark on some type of education initiative to make sure the licensee takes the appropriate steps to remain compliant. Adjudication is our legal arm of the board. So they act on behalf of the board and assist the board in carrying out board-imposed orders, actions, fines, and penalties, and also make sure that the licensees come back into compliance. So if action is serious enough, it can be referred to the Office of the Attorney General, and that agency works in concert with ABRA and the ABC board, again, to make sure that that licensee comes back into compliance. There is no restriction on most of these licenses. We have a cap system for our off-premise licenses. For our Class A licenses, we have about 300, and for the Class B licenses, there are 250. Our Class A licenses are reserved for the retail beer, wine, and liquor stores. Those are most of the fine wine shops that you might see that sell wine, but also sell some spirits in addition to wine. We have wholesalers. We have a number of wholesalers across the city, and they're authorized to sell beer, wine, and spirits to other licensed or retailers for the purpose of resale to consumers. Class A wholesalers, again, also sell to restaurants, the other smaller liquor stores, and they can actually provide a temporary license applicant or licensee with the alcohol or spirit for events that they do in a non-licensed venue. We also have manufacturers, and I'm kind of happy to say this, we have about 3 or 4 coming to the district at this point. The Class B licenses are just for beer and wine stores. Now, I have a little asterisk down here. We are currently experiencing a moratorium with Class B licenses, but we have some legislation proposed before the council that would allow for new Class B licenses. Or Class Bs are usually reserved for full-service grocery stores such as your Giants, Harris Teeters, and we have a number of those coming to the city. But we also want to have some of the smaller beer and wine retail shops. It's a little restrictive, but they can sell on Sundays, which is one distinction between the Class A and the Class B. All of our on-premise license classes, there are a number of them. These are the Class C licenses, which allow for the sale of beer, wine, and spirit in an on-premise capacity. We have the hotels, which has a food requirement. We have the nightclubs and the lounges, and although it's implied that all of our on-premise licenses must have some food, only 2 license classes, the hotel and the restaurant, have to actually meet a food requirement and have to submit what we call quarterly statements to support the amount of food that is sold. So for the restaurants and the hotels, the food requirement is 45% of the gross annual sales, or $2,000 per seat base. The CT licenses are tavern licenses. Didn't mean to get in there, but and also with some of the restaurant and tavern licenses, you can combine what we call a brew pub. So this would allow for the distillation and the production of actual beer or wine on the premise. It can't be resold at this point, but we are in the process of proposing some legislation that would perhaps allow that. So you wonder how you have places like District Chop House or Gordon Biersch. They can brew on site and sell on premise. It just can't be sold off premise for off premise consumption. And then our CX multi-purpose, those are more or less places that not really anything goes, but you can rent to the public. They really aren't regular hours, but they will allow for like special events. They're also for private clubs, rail cars. So Amtrak, if Amtrak wanted to have a bar car, that's what they would use for the rail car. And we also have the marine vessels. And one thing that we're seeing a lot of new licenses in this category are the boats. The only difference between the Class C and the Class D is that the Class D are actually just beer and wine licenses. So we don't really have any Class D in nightclubs and lounges. Most of those are in the C category. Before the application, there is some homework involved. There's a lot of homework involved. The first things that we ask for with an application is your zoning certification. Unlike DCRA, we cannot license any establishment that is zoned anything less than commercial. All of our new applications must be within appropriate distances of churches, schools, and recreation centers. So we, of course, ask that all of our applicants are tax compliant, and we cannot grant you a license if you have a felony conviction within 10 years or a misdemeanor conviction within 5 years. Usually with the misdemeanor, it's at the board's discretion, and sometimes they'll conduct a fact finding just to get the nature of the misdemeanor. So, but again, our law excludes you from applying for a license if in fact you have a felony conviction of 10 years. As far as the application process, there are 3 phases that we break it down into. The first is application acceptance. This is after you've done your homework and you're ready to get your application in. Every piece of information, like you don't need all your business licenses at this point, especially if you're under construction. But they will assess appropriate license fees, and then your application is advertised in DC Register, which is a district publication, and then we also prepare placards, which effectively notices the public that there's a new application that is applied at a certain address. And we notify all of the advisory neighborhood commissioners, and we send them either email, and statute requires that we send it by postal mail still, so they do get that, and they are actually put on notice that, again, there's a new application coming to an end. After your 45-day notice period, that's the amount of time that your placards must remain posted. That application, if it hasn't been protested, will definitely go to the board for approval. Again, the only thing that would exclude anyone from approval is if you're non-tax compliant, or if, again, there is a felony conviction within 10 years. So I'll quickly wrap up going through the new application approval. Some of the information that is crucial is a landlord affidavit, and this is a notification from the landlord that you are going into the premise, you will be serving and selling alcohol. A menu, especially if you're a restaurant, that's important. We want to make sure you're functioning as a restaurant and not any of the other license classes such as a nightclub or tavern. Exterior pictures, as well as an interior diagram of the layout, detailing how many or approximately how many seats will be in the establishment. The police clearances, which I spoke of, and we are moving towards a national criminal background check. Diagrams or photographs, if you have any outdoor seating area, which again, the Sidewalk Cafe, and Linda spoke to this, anything that's public space, you have to obtain a public space permit for. So we can approve you for it, but we can't actually issue a license detailing Sidewalk Cafe seating unless you have the appropriate public space permit from the Department of, or DDOT, Department of Transportation. Last step would be the new license issuance. So at that point, we make sure all of your licenses and certificates from DCR and OTR have been issued. You have your certificate of occupancy, your settlement statement, if in fact you had financing or had to obtain financing, or you were purchasing from another licensee. Again, we run the clean hands, and an inspection is actually conducted by our enforcement division. So we're making sure that you stay true to what you represented on your license application. Renewal cycles are every 3 years depending on your license class. You don't just renew with us. There are other agencies with which you have to work to make sure, number one, that your entity is in good standing with DCRA corporations. You still have to be tax compliant. So the new license is then issued, but it's a conditional renewal because you still have to go through the placard period. We effectively notice the community that you have renewed your license, and this is the time for any objectors to come forward if in fact